Anchor Bay, Episode 2, Carving Mountains. I had a funny epiphany about foam scenery the other day. For millions of years, it condensed into crude oil, only to be turned into extruded polystyrene sheet, which was then carved into the rocks it came from. What a bizarre cycle. For Anchor Bay, I thought I'd build on my successful experiments done on the 14 by 42 foot layout. I planned to carve most of the landforms from layers of extruded polystyrene foam, known as XPS. While very, very far from being the most environmentally friendly layout construction material, I wanted to see what it could bring to a layout with some dramatic seaside scenery. The way it's extruded during manufacturing also makes it remarkably easy to chip into a very convincing, accurate rock formation. I had my client purchase an obscene amount of it for all the river canyon and rolling hills that would adorn the layout in its final form. As you might have guessed, I brought back some spare sheets to use for the ALTA 2. About 24 sheets were purchased in all, and it's gone to good use. I've also been able to incorporate most of the offcuts into rock formations I'm creating between Petaluma and Anchor Bay. The foam comprises the base of the peninsula upon which Anchor Bay sits. I also use sheets and offcuts to give 4 inches of elevation to the valley town above the staging yard at Petaluma. It's also a base component for the return loop and hill between Petaluma and Aroma. A good layout begins with good concept art. I first did watercolor and line sketches of how I wanted the landforms to work. From there, I took offcuts of foam and stacked them into roughly what I wanted. In the return loop area, I'm experimenting with using foam as a frame upon which the Woodland Scenic shaper sheet will be applied. That way, I can easily fit an entire mountain and take it off the layout for track maintenance. By contrast, the lush river canyon, inspired by the Eel River, is made using a more traditional layer cake style. I wanted to do this so I could carve all the volcanic stone found in that region realistically. The rocks also hide a secret. Each mountain section contains a tunnel, which has a wedge-shaped access hatch that slides away. Learning Japanese joinery a few years ago gave me this idea. Now you don't have visible seams to access the track inside the tunnels anymore. The rock carving itself was done using a variety of techniques. The most effective one is this. Gather real photos of the rock faces you want to model. Figure out which types of stone they're made from and how it looks, fractures, and weathers. Then carving is easy. You can use a pruning saw to cut larger chunks to size. Then, layer using tight bond glue and allow a day to dry before coming back to carve. I use a hot wire foam cutter for the big forms. Then, I used a box cutter with a fresh blade and I tack the rock surface. I add the seam lines in. I cut mostly in one direction, but randomly. Then, I go nearly perpendicular to get some cross grain. Using the back of the blade, the dull side, I chip away the slices to reveal a very detailed rock formation. Use your artistic eye and think about erosion when carving. Where does water run off? Once you think you're done, wipe the area with the flat palm of your hand to get loose chunks off of it. Then prime it with an acrylic paint as a base color. Anchor Bay was also built in a somewhat unusual way. Since the peninsula is very large, I cut an access hatch into the center of town while I'm working on it. I have access to everything that way. The hatch itself is in the center of town. It's sloped uphill as well, and eventually there will be structures atop it. The hatch seamlessly blends back into the layout when it's shut. I thought I'd share my technique for laying the Woodland Scenic's foam grade risers. First, I plug in my hot glue gun. Then, I mark the center line of the track with a pen. Then, I place the foam riser above it and mark both sides of it with a marker. Next, I dollop on some Type Bond 2 wood glue over everything except for the 4 corners. When I'm ready, I quickly apply hot glue to the 4 corners and gently but firmly place each riser into place. The hot glue gives the instant tack to hold it in place, and the tight bond gives you a confident, permanent bond. That's how I got some of the nice flowing main line through the canyon. Most tunnel portals were sized using NMRA gauges and photographic reference of the Northwestern Pacific. I had my client purchase some great 3D printed tunnel portals from ZYX Graphics. They match SP prototypes and look right on this layout. The tunnels are a mix of solid rock, timber, and concrete-lined prototypes. I'll probably also build a slide detection fence in one portion of the layout as well. Another scene on the layout is a sizable lumber mill built from a craftsman kit. I cut out the land upon which it sits so my client can build the mill on the workbench and install it in one piece once it's complete. The next step for this layout will be painting the foam a base coat color of paint, adding the Sculptamold, and then painting and weathering all the exposed rockwork. But before we get to any of that, I have to paint the whole backdrop, so stay tuned for those videos.